So we're going to be installing this tile in this wall, Backsplash. There's quite a bit of cuts from going around the cabinets to the window to the outlets. So I'm going to be installing this solo.
No, he's not.
So I'm going to be showing you how, as a carpenter, I'm going to do this because I don't do tile often, but when I do, these little tips that I'm going to show you do help me out a lot. And yeah, we're going to get to it. First step is going to be obviously after covering. Generally, I use drywall shims, but they didn't have any, so I'm going to be using these little strips of 1/4-inch plywood. 2p10. You can also use hot glue and just some snips because I don't want to be using a saw for this. So what's going to happen is I'm going to use these to create a pattern around this wall, around the window and outlets, and then I'm going to lay all the tile down, put the pattern on top, mark all the tiles, and get them cut so I can install them all at once. So I'm using CA glue, and these are just going to be little stabilizers because it's 1/4-inch plywood. So I'm just going to stabilize it wherever I can. But the process is very simple. So just make sure I'm tight everywhere and squeeze this in. For the switches, I'm just going to get a piece as close as I can to the edge here, and then just mark the top and the bottom so I can trace this easily. So the template is done. Obviously we got to take it out so I can go near the faucet. So I just put this little patch and mark where the patch starts and ends. So after I take it out, I can just glue that in. But yeah, we're going to take this down and then I'm going to show you the next step. So we took the pattern from the kitchen and we laid it over the tile that's going to be installed. Now this was kind of nice because we were able to take different tiles from different boxes so we can get a nice cohesive color variation and also nail down the layout that is going around the window and obviously on the ends. So all we have to do next is start tracing around the pattern, do the outlets, do the window, the ends, and after that it's just cutting and installing. So yeah, let's get to it. So I marked the perimeter of the pattern onto the tile with a China marker, basically just a crayon. So now onto marking the switches. I'm always going to space out the receptacles with these spacers, so I'm going to use this as a pattern. So I'm just going to place it right by my tick marks and mark it. So my cutting setup is nothing special. I really don't enjoy cutting with cordless power tools. I just feel like the RPMs, when you're trying to cut through something hard, it does slow down. It doesn't matter if you have a full battery or even one of these bigger ones. I just don't enjoy using these corded grinders for that. So I just have a polishing wheel on this one. And for cutting, I'm using a mesh blade and just a regular old corded Makita. And then for saw, it's just rigid with a stone blade. That's the ones that have the little notches on the blade. So yeah, let's get to cutting. All right, so we're going to be cutting this full piece. Again, make sure that the base is clean, stable, no vibration. If you want to line it up, if this one has a laser, but the battery's dead or whatever power set. So a lot of times if I just want to do a complete precision cut and not be stabilizing it as I cut, I'm just going to put a little flat edge against the blade and just basically look at where my line is and track it that way. This looks pretty good, so it means that I can just cruise right along. So I'm gonna be cutting all the way through and just really slow. That's the key. Alrighty, so the blade, it's nothing special. Again, just a rigid from Home Depot, but you can look at the cut and see that it's relatively straight and really clean just by going slow and having a stable surface. So I marked the perimeter of the pattern onto the tile with a China marker, basically just a crayon. So now onto marking the switches. I'm always going to space out the receptacles with these spacers, so I'm going to use this as a pattern. So I'm just going to place it right by my tick marks and mark it. So when cutting these pieces, your main enemy is going to be vibration. So you want to make sure that your table is clean and nice and flat. If you have more notches, I typically just lay down a piece of plywood, but I just gotta make sure before the blade touches the pieces that they're flat and that there's nothing loose. So we're gonna cut out this little receptacle box, so let's get her started. So the main thing when cutting natural stone is just going really slow to avoid chipping, all of that. So we were able to get some nice clean cuts even with an older blade. So now that I did the outline for this, because this is what's gonna show, we're gonna put a piece of plywood underneath it and flip her over so we can finish the cuts on the back with a grinder. So we're just gonna follow these lines. A lot of times when you're cutting a corner, whether it's on a receptacle or just over around a cabinet, you're gonna be left with these. You can hit them with a grinder, but I just like using this file. This is where this comes in handy. And so yeah, I'm just gonna put it underneath here. It works particularly nice in natural stone. You get a nice clean corner without overcutting. So we have all the pieces cut. By using the pattern, we were able to line up everything the way we wanted to in terms of keeping full little pieces on every end, including top, bottom, and around the window, and also minimized travel. Going in, marking the tile, going out, cutting it. This way we marked everything, we just cut it all at once. So yeah, now all we gotta do is install it. So this is the Thinset we're gonna be using to install this tile. It's the 4XLT by Grout. And this is not a large tile, but it's very heavy and it has a lot of moving pieces. So the reason why I picked this Thinset is because it's gonna keep them from sagging and sliding on each other. And the mixing is really simple. You just gotta follow the directions on the back. And yeah, so let's get to mixing. So I got my mortar, my clean water ready to go. Countertops are covered up, and then I got an extra little hard surface above the countertops. I got a spacer here so I can keep the tile off the countertops, about 3/16, and then I went around and marked the low spots and the high spots so I know to account for those when I'm installing the tile. So we're gonna start spreading the Thinset. Now I'm using a 3/8 trawl. When I spread it perpendicular like this, I'm gonna get the full 3/8, but obviously as the angle changes, you get less and less. So to gauge that I'm getting the same even spread, I just spread it with my hand right behind the handle like this and try and keep my fingers perpendicular to the wall. So it's easy for me to gauge exactly how much I'm spreading every time. So let's get to it. So again, we're keeping our fingers perpendicular. You can do it any way you want, but the goal is to keep the Thinset even throughout the wall. So I'm just gonna keep feathering this. Alright, so now we're just setting it into the Thinset. Just rough for now, as long as it sticks. Roughly. Then we're going to check the spacing. Once the spacing is good, I'm just going to use a grout float to kind of pat it in to make sure it's nice and flat. I'm not going to use my hand or anything else. Just a little, and then we'll start adjusting the spacing. But after it's onto the Thinset, we're just going to kind of feel for any lipping. It's a lot of moving pieces, so I'm not going to be real picky. As long as it kind of feels smooth and there's no big lumps, we should be good to go. Alrighty, tile installation is done. All we gotta do is let it dry and then grout. So yeah. So the grout I'm gonna be using is made by Grout, and this is not an ad for them. I'm not working with them on this project, but there's two types of grout: unsanded and sanded. Unsanded is for these smaller joints here, and then sanded would be for these larger joints. The joints on these are very inconsistent. The thing that I like about this grout is that there's no unsanded or sanded. Just the same grout goes from a 1/16 to 1/2 inch. It's also got microband and it's fiber reinforced. And also it's one of the only grouts that I've used that actually matches with the grout caulk that they sell. So this always matches up pretty nicely. So yeah, let's mix it up and throw it on the wall. Grouting is super simple, pretty self-explanatory. You just get the grout into the seams. Something that does help me a lot is just using a board, and that's so I can just set it up against the wall and start spreading it up. And I'm not dropping everything on the countertop. Also helps me really packing the grout aggressively in there, because that is one of the more common causes for bubbles or cracks in grout, is when people just skim over it once, clean it, and call it a day. I did learn early on to really pack the grout into the joints just for a longer lasting joint. It's less bubbles, so when you're cleaning, you don't have to come back and touch anything up. So last tip is let the grout dry before cleaning it, because you can clean it with clean water and a sponge 10 times over and you're still going to get the haze. So I just let it dry a little bit and then take a dry sponge and simply just brush the haze off. Might take a little work in some areas, but at least you know once you're done, you don't have to go back over it.